right, we are back on the Young Turks. Well, all week long we've been doing a series on the Koch brothers. Yesterday we showed you what they're trying to do and trying to take away and dismantle Social Security. Today we're going to tell you about how they're going after education. Now, for those of you who didn't see yesterday's show, let me remind you who the Koch brothers are. They are David and Charles Koch. Their estimated net worth is $50 billion. Their original family fortune came from their father, who worked with Joseph Stalin. And now they're also enormous oil speculators, so they help to drive up your price of gas. But that's not all they do. Well, when you get into education, they do a hell of a lot of damage. First of all, they've given over $14 million in educational grants. Well, that sounds pretty good. What's wrong with that? And some of them are legitimate grants, but a lot of them are given so that universities like Florida State hire the specific professors that the Koch brothers want to push their agenda. And in fact, they've given over to 150 schools. Just like when you think like, hey, they did some charity, isn't that lovely? They're like, no. No, the charities to make sure that we can have these fake professors who are on our side. Fantastic. But that's not the least of it. In fact, the real problem is what they're doing in public schools. Well, they're both huge problems. But number one, of course, they want to privatize the schools so that they can make a buck off of it. Fantastic. And it also goes along with their so-called libertarian ideology, which, of course, they immediately discard when they can make a buck off the government, which they've done over and over in their careers. But the other thing that they've done is they're putting in $36 million into that project. But part of the money is going to resegregating some of those schools, including one in North Carolina. That seems so shocking that, you know, as you watch, you go, really? Can that be true? Well, it is. They actually funded guys to take over that school board. Luckily, the story has a good ending. But first, let's show you what happened there. This is part of the documentary put together by Brave New Foundation called Koch Brothers Exposed.
The Koch brothers have spent tens of millions of dollars to get their point of view instilled in classrooms, amongst faculty members, and in students.
The Koch brothers, of course, have a national libertarian agenda, and they have brought it to Wake County by means of the school board elections, and they want to destroy, really, the model of equal schools, equal opportunity for every child.
It has also sparked this protest right in front of the Wake County School Administration building.
They do not like a large public school system, and they were determined to take it apart as quickly as they could.
The Wake County School Board threatens to turn back the clocks to an era of segregation. We must stand up and fight back.
All right. Well, I assure you that I did not mean that Freudian slip earlier. Okay, now, to help us decipher this, Robert Greenwald, producer and director of Koch Brothers Exposed, president of Brave New Foundation as well. Robert, first of all, what happened in North Carolina there? Because that story seems so shocking. What does it mean to resegregate the school? Tell us about that story.
What happened in North Carolina, and we were shocked also, after working on this for over a year, this was one of the 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 worst examples. I mean, it just goes on and on. Local school system, totally racially and economically integrated and functioning well. People really enjoying the schools, getting a lot out of it. And they went in through Americans for Prosperity, their so-called activist arm, which is a front group for them. And they organized around the issue of no busing, local schools, all code words, as we explain in the film and in the investigation. And they initially were successful in helping throw out the good school board. But as you said before, there's a happy ending to this. The film, the video, people organizing, the local NAACP, they really went out and people said, wait a minute, we don't want to be told by the Koch brothers what should be done by our school. We don't want to be told by Americans for Prosperity.
So the politicians bought off by the Koch brothers got thrown out and they went back to the way things were. That's actually really, really encouraging because sometimes, you know, we get a little despondent about democracy and how much you can get purchased. It's good to see that it works at the local level still. So now, any thoughts? And I know this is a tough one, but why? Like, I get why they want to privatize schools. I get why they want to pay lower taxes, be able to pollute, et cetera. but why go back towards resegregation? I mean, in the beginning, you know, neighborhood schools, that's a good code word, and you think, well, maybe they care about neighborhood schools. But then forced busing, that's what George Wallace used to say.
Exactly.
So what is it with these guys?
Well, it's hard to know. You know, my entire family are therapists, so they deal with psychological motivation. I try to stick with the facts. But as far as we know, what they do is they target and they go after institutions that are run well by the government. And that's the common denominator between Social Security and the schools, right? Those are two of the pillars of our society. And if you want to tear apart government, it's hard to do it with good functioning schools and a good Social Security system. So they and Americans for Prosperity and the think tanks, all working together, have identified these and attacked mercilessly.
And by the way, you know, I don't know if they intend this. They got to look at themselves in the mirror, so they probably think they're doing the right thing in their own minds, et cetera. But, you know, throughout history, if you look at why a country has done great, whether it's, you know, Scotland, whether it's the United States, well, you go to any country, public schools, and all of a sudden there's an explosion in growth. Yes. Why? Because you've empowered all those people. Only the rich had opportunity to educate their kids before. When everybody has an opportunity, it turns out there's a lot of geniuses in the country, right? Yes. And these guys are trying to dismantle that. And then what happens? There's no opportunity to reach their level of wealth. They basically do a moat around their wealth, and they say, all right, everybody else be damned. Now, along those lines, let's talk about colleges real quick. Now, they're giving some money to colleges for, you know, whatever reasons, and then specifically, though, they're donating some money to say, only if you hire certain professors. Where is that happening, and what's behind that?
Well, we can't find out every place it happens because they're very smart about hiding the money, putting it in the shadows, going through places where you don't know who's giving what to whom, and most importantly, you don't know the contracts. But we do know that in many of the schools, and they give to over 150, there are written contracts that say your money is dependent on doing the following: hiring the following professors who are chosen by this committee that they control, lectures that they have control over the content, guest speakers that they control. And Florida State University, to their great credit, the economics department was getting a lot of money from them, and the student body stood up and voted a resolution saying, this is infringing on academic freedom, we shouldn't do it. And the faculty stood up and said, we shouldn't do it, which is a real example of they can, you know, take as much money as they want, but there are going to be people who are going to say enough is enough.
Robert, one last thing on this, because I know that part of it is, hey, let's brainwash the kids that are going to these schools, et cetera, at least get their agenda out in that way. But I think the real important reason why they do that is that so they can go back later and go, what are you talking about? I got a scientist at Florida State, or I got a professor at this college or this university that totally agrees with our point of view, without identifying them as Koch bought and sold. It's kind of what they do with think tanks and politicians.
Right. I think it's both. You know, when you're a real ideologue and you believe in certain ideology, you'll spend as much money as you have to implement that. So that's part of it. And then part of it is it's absolutely brilliant from a strategic point of view, because they have experts who they are funding, some in the schools, some in the think tanks, and then they cite the studies of these experts to support the positions that they believe in. We disagree with them, but it's not stupid.
Yeah, there's no question about that. All right, Robert Greenwald from Koch brothers Exposed. And tomorrow we do the last part of this series, and that is on cancer. Here, take a look at a piece we're going to show you tomorrow.
We have 15 homes in this area, and maybe 11 people has died or more with cancer.
The Koch brothers are killing me and my family.
That's devastating, and that's tomorrow. Don't miss that.